We're here today to learn more about tea and the use of tea in spas with the Camellia's Tea House team. I've got Ajit and Lubna here with me today. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me.
No,
Pleasure.
it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for
Thank you.
inviting us, Sarah.
Oh my goodness, I'm a huge fan of your teas. I'm going to just touch on when I was at the spa at South Lodge, we blended our own tea with you, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it was one of the best experiences making our jasmine, the spa at South Lodge tea with you. So I'm a huge fan of Camellia's Tea House and including it as part of an experience when you have a spa treatment. So, on that note, what actually goes into creating a bespoke tea blend and where does that process begin?
The first few things that we need to consider is what's the intention behind the tea? What is its purpose? What is it going to do? And then the next thing we need to understand is how is a person going to feel when they drink that tea, right? So once I kind of, or we kind of like work that out, then we can kind of start building layers to the tea, and we have three fundamental layers that we think about. And the first one will be more about the function of the tea. So we need to think about what kind of ingredients are we going to use. And each ingredient has to be really thoroughly researched. It has to come with solid science backing. And it's really we look at what are the chemical compounds in that ingredient. Are they going to interact well with other ingredients? And then what is the optimal quantity do we need to make that tea functional or that ingredient functional? And is it safe? So those are kind of the questions, when we're looking at ingredients that we think about. And then I guess the second thing, which is, obviously the most obvious thing, is about the flavor. So you have the function, but the function has to be enjoyable, right? So that comes through
Yeah,
flavor.
yeah.
And then lastly, it's all about the story. It's about the brand identity. And so then, so we kind of tie that all in together. And yeah, so I guess those are the first few things that we would think about. But as a team, our goals is to actually create something that has a sensory experience, but is backed by solid science evidence. And we do this because we really want to make sure that whoever's drinking it, receives maximum health benefits. So yeah, so I guess those are the first fundamental things that we would think about.
And I was just going to add to that actually is, Lubna is the font of all of our wellness tea knowledge, being a homeopathic doctor and very experienced herbalist, and also having worked in spas for many years. But we've kind of like, we were very, when we first started this business, this was like over 12 years ago, like a lot of the science behind our teas just wasn't out there. And it's so, but we knew what we were doing was correct because, we were using lots of traditional Chinese medicine principles and, herbal medicine has been used, throughout the ages. And it's been really great for us. And, probably in the last sort of, I don't know, 3 years or so, that there's been a lot of new research around botanicals. There's a centre in Oxford that does a lot of research. There's stuff around the world that's coming out. So we can, for the first time, really dive deeply into scientific research, things like lavender, what are the benefits of lavender, from a scientific point of view, and, does it really do the things that people associate with lavender? And so we've tried, and I think we're amongst the first tea companies to do this. We really try to lock in that authenticity of the products that we use, using science as our reference into our tea blends, and that's just really important for us in terms of authenticity of the blends, as Lubna was saying. But also, it's just important for us to know that when people are spending money on buying our teas, and suppose it says it's good for digestion, we want to make sure it really is good for digestion. It's not just a bunch of herbs that have been associated with digestion for thousands of years. So we're really, really happy that that kind of waterfall of science is now, kind of available and readily kind of used in what we do. Um, yeah, I just wanted to make that point.
Oh, and I didn't realize that though. I didn't realize that there were centers out there doing this research. And I think you're right. Sometimes when you see a tea for digestion, you say, "Oh, I wonder how that works, or what is the science behind it. But you're coming at it very much from a functional level, which is what people are
Yeah,
much more interested in now,
yeah,
aren't they? People want an authentic, not results driven, but they want the product to do what it says it will
yeah,
do
they
and have
do.
scientific backing, because
Yeah,
we're much more
exactly.
aware
And
of
we do
that
get
now.
frustrated. Yeah, and even to this day, and I just think the mass market brands don't think about these things in the way that we do. And they're mass market. We're very much kind of at the luxury end of wellness. And but it is really frustrating. You walk into Holland and Barrett in one of the other big shops, and all of the teas for sleep, digestion, energy, blah blah blah. There's no mention about any of the science around it. It's just a bunch. It feels like it's just chamomile is known for being kind of relaxing, so let's throw a bit of chamomile in the sleep tea, and let's add a bit of this. But there's no dosaging methodology. There's no science aspects to those teas. And hopefully, I mean, I think we're leading the charge, but I really hope that people begin to understand that if you're going to pay money for something that's good for sleep, then it really should be something that helps you sleep. And we've finally got to that point in time where that information is available. So all good, really. Yeah.
So if a spa, I mean, on that note, if you're saying about like the end result, a tea that for energy or a tea for sleep, when you do work with a spa, what are the first questions you ask them, before recommending a tea or before creating their signature tea blend? What are the sort of things that you need to know?
Well, it's really the most important thing is what's their wellness philosophy, and if they have any pillars that they would like us to work around. I mean, recently I worked with a hotel in a spa hotel in Singapore, and they had four fundamental pillars, and that really was their brand identity. And so I created four teas that associated with those pillars. So it's very important that I understand what are they about, what's important to them. So that can reflect in the tea as well. And then the second thing is sometimes spas they need tea as a way, a synergy between, the tea and the product. And we've also, Ajit may explain later that, we have worked with spas and hotels where we have created teas that completely align with their product range and that carries, the same ingredients. So obviously you're having a more of a holistic approach, when a client actually comes into the spa and will experience that. So that's a very important one. And then it's also, what does the spa want there, when the client is there drinking the tea, what do they, how do they want the client to feel when they leave, the premises?
Mm.
So that's also, pretty key to how I will look at formulating a tea. And I guess the next one is it's good to understand where they stand today, currently, with tea. How do they serve tea? Do they serve tea? And is it important to them? Because, quite often tea is an afterthought and it just becomes about, oh, here's a cup of tea in the relaxation room. But tea is so much
Mm.
more than that, especially when you're formulating with intent. You want to make sure that when that client walks into the spa, the tea follows them right till they leave. And because that becomes a really full, holistic wellness journey, it kind of completes it all before the client leaves. And it's also, you create those moments, right, where they're having a cup of tea and they're reflecting on their treatment or they're reflecting on life and they're just enjoying the moment. And that's quite important. So those are the things I would look at. And then sometimes I will kind of dive a little deeper and I like to understand what the treatments are about. And especially I think if we are creating a range of bespoke teas, then it's nice to understand what are the treatments about, what is the spa menu, and how can the teas align within that menu. And I guess lastly, I may look at, especially for spas not based in London, I guess, you know, say for instance, I can work with a spa that's based in Bali, and the
Mm,
vibe, would be very different to a spa in London.
yeah.
So I do consider, a sense of place because that's got to reflect in the tea as well. So those are my main considerations when I'm looking at starting a project with a client.
But on that note, you were saying like if you're in Bali and there's that location piece compared to London, how do you it sounds like a run. How do you translate a spa's brand identity into a flavor? Like, how do you say, oh well, this one is, I'm using the word chamomile or lavender. How do you get to that point?
Well, I mean, I personally, obviously, you look at, again, talking about the sense of place. So, say, for instance, a spa has a kind of a modern, minimalistic look, then I might kind of um, look at, okay, fine, this is kind of a very clean kind of vibe about it. I may look at citrus notes. I may look at some refreshing ingredients, something that's revitalizing. Maybe light florals, or I look at the what is the local botanicals like? Can we source them? Can we integrate the local botanicals in the blend? And then a spa that has more kind of an earthy vibe, I may look at okay, we may need to integrate some spice, some roots, some deeper botanicals, and maybe for a more luxurious kind of spa vibe, I will look at perhaps layering the teas with more aromatics, maybe with, look at rare ingredients, something to give it an extra kind of indulgent feel about it. So yeah, so I guess that's how I would initially look at it.
But also, can I just
And I
add to
guess
that actually? Like we also we've been doing, I think, and that's because I'm a tea head, is some cool stuff with tea at the moment, which kind of leads into what Libna's been saying because we've been working with, I mean, we work with a really large global luxury hotel spa brand. And, they came to us, they've got a Chinese heritage, and they came to us and said, look, can you create a range of products that kind of really dials into kind of traditional Chinese medicine, the five elements, fire, earth, metal,
mm,
etc. And but also something that has synergy with the product brands that we use within our spas. So, if we're going to give tea to our clients as part of the treatment journey or within the relaxation room, we want to know that, the tea has synergy, not just in terms of the ingredients with our spa brands, but also smells and feels like the kind of the spa product brands as well. So there's a real kind of tie-in to the ingredients, but also the aromas and kind of the flavors that elicit, or the feelings of flavor that are elicited from that. And we've done that quite a lot. We've worked with product brands where we've created teas for them, and it's based on a smell. For example, our oils smell like this. Can you create a tea that marries really
mm.
nicely with that smell? Or they've come to us and said, look, we have these certain ingredients. We work with La Mer, for example. They said, look, we have this incredible marine broth, and we really want a tea that reminds you of the sea, but also has some of the ingredients that also kind of, yeah, as I keep saying, synergy with the La Mer kind of brand. So we created these wonderful teas, and it just kind of dials into a brand or a spa kind of identity if you can have food and drink which kind of works in lockstep with with the other things that you're offering within a spa.
I think it's interesting because it seems so simple. Like it's we'll blend a tea, but when you're actually adding all these layers to it, the functional, the flavor, the tying into. all of the brands and stuff, it's a lot more complex. There's so much to the whole process. I mean, how do you balance the flavor, the function, the aesthetics? How do you make that all balance? Or you're
That
a
it really
magician?
is a balancing act.
That's the magic.
No. Can I just say, Lubna, can I just quickly say on Lubna's behalf, and I know I'm her brother, so I'm a bit biased, but she is like a witch in a cauldron. And like seriously, obviously you need to do the science and you need to check which ingredients and all of that stuff. But when it comes down to the final design piece, it's often, I think I'm right in saying, right, Lubes, it's often instinct based. It's like
Yeah,
you've got a
totally.
vibe for something, it often tastes much nicer than if it's just too.
Instinct and experience, I think. I think we've been in the game for a long time, and so that obviously has a play in it. And yes, it's so intuitive. It's all about the senses, right? So, and yeah, I think, Jesus, you're 100% right there. But yeah, no, to answer your question, you know, thing is, with balancing flavor, function, aesthetics, it's if it, with flavor, if it doesn't taste good, no one's going to buy it, right? So, so you can forget about the functionality of it. And then if the tea doesn't have function, it doesn't have a purpose, and then it just becomes a regular tea. So that's why, for us, it's so important. We go back to the science, right? Because it's so
Yeah,
important for that ingredient to really come, really show that science behind it, because that's what gives it purpose. We do as a company is so important for us, to ensure that whatever we produce, we really produce it with intent. And 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 the last bit, the aesthetics, it's got to look beautiful because people engage better to something that's pleasing to the eye. So that all three do marry well. They have to marry well together. Otherwise, I don't think you have the one. It's just not going to work. So yeah, it is a balancing act, and it's a fun thing to do.
and magical as well. So can you, I mean, obviously we touched on it earlier, but there's obviously a huge difference between a wellness-led functional tea and a purely flavor-led blend, isn't there? I guess that's the kind of
That's right.
the big, your USP is that you are wellness-led. That's right.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So absolutely. And and the difference between the two is, well, I mean, wellness, as you know, it's all, it's what the body needs, right? So it's all about cognitive support, sleeps, help someone with sleep, or help with stress regulation, um, I don't know, gut health, so on and so forth. And whereas flavor really becomes about awakening the sensory organs, and it becomes more about a memory and an experience. And it's so important to really combine all of that and get it right. Otherwise, you're not going to have a very kind of a complete, well-rounded kind of blend of tea. So yeah, they all play their part.
And how long does it take you to develop a new tea? If it's a tea that you're going to develop for yourselves or develop for someone for a spa, how long does the whole process take? Because I'm sure with all of the different complex layers and then the different tastings and things like
Yeah.
that, that it's a solid process.
Yeah, it is. And it's a really good question because it really depends on the brief that we receive from the spa. It could take as little as 1 to 4 weeks, right? And sometimes, yeah, so I mean, the thing is, it depends on a look. It depends on the concept development. So that's the brief. Then it depends on the science. It's all about, okay, we really need to make sure that each ingredient comes with that science, which is obviously fundamental to us. Then it's all, and then that's then, followed by the formulation. Then you have the testing and the refinement, and then you have the communication and the collaboration between us and the SPA team. So that kind of comes towards the end of the project, where we're looking for, they need to approve the blend. Further tweaks may needed, and if that's the case, that could actually change the flavor profile. So we need to be very careful around that as well. And then finally, it's all about sourcing the ingredients. So, like we said earlier, if we need to create a synergy between a tea and the spa product, and if that requires maybe a rare ingredient, and we can't always get that from our supply chain, so then we may need to look outside. And again, it's all about, for us, it's all about quality, making sure it comes in with the right grading, it's organic, it's been sourced from the right place. So all of that comes into play. And then finally, we don't just give the tea out. We actually go through the science. We write a science document that supports the tea, that helps with training, that helps with, a guests come in, into the spa, and they may, I don't know, they may have a sensitivity to a certain ingredient. So it's all about safety, right? We ensure as a company that we provide that safety as well. So yes, all of that into play. I mean, some teas, some blends can come together really quickly, like I said, a week, and some may take longer to evolve.
Well, I really enjoyed the process when we did our tea at the spa at South Lodge, and we had various tastings and the whole process. I learned so much from Amanda when she would come in and create the tea and talk through with us. And I think it's a really enjoyable experience from the spa side as
Yeah,
well. It
yeah,
really gets you thinking about how it's not, like you very much said at the beginning, it's not something that you just make and drink. It's actually part of the experience, and how
yeah.
it becomes your concept. So I really
Yeah.
enjoyed the process. It was really
Great.
fascinating to
Yeah.
do with you.
No, it is good fun. It is good fun.
From a commercial perspective, and this is pretty good to you, Ajit, where should spas be using their bespoke tea?
From a commercial perspective, there's just so many different ways that spas can use their teas. And apart from the tea just being used within the spa and also being retailed, which is kind of the obvious approach to tea, um, is, the spas are now saying to us, look, now that, kind of their typical clients, they travel a lot, they're quite wealthy, they're very dialed into kind of wellness with food and drink, and they're all aware of longevity concepts and biohacking and all of these kind of things that we all read about and listen to. So they're now beginning to give that sort of feedback into the hotels, and the kind of things that we're now doing with other parts of the hotel is, for example, creating in-room sleep tea rituals. So, so we're working with the spa directors to create really wonderful, again, science-driven sleep teas, which help you to relax, and also just but creating beautiful rituals around that. So we've created meditations where people will drink the tea and they'll listen to a meditation that just helps them be mindful about what they're drinking, or a meditation that will help them to kind of drift slowly into sleep. And so we're just seeing lots of different ways that the tea is now really being embraced in different parts of the hotel. And like another cool thing about having your own bespoke tea actually is, just talk about in-room things, is that, quite a lot of spas are saying, look, we really want to find ways to drive traffic into the spa from the hotel guests. So a lot of spas are saying, look, can you please create, turn down or some kind of gift packaging with our bespoke tea, that when people experience them in the room, the only other place in the hotel they can re-engage with that tea is by going to the spa. So we're finding spas are using little techniques, and it seems to work quite well, yeah, so there's loads of little cool ways. And we're also working with one large global hotel brand who, Lubna's created a range of teas for, who are saying, no, look, we want to find a way to be present in our clients' experiences away from the hotel. and we want to have our brand in the home as well as in the hotel. So you see hotels are selling their beds because if people have a really good night's sleep in a hotel, they want to buy the bed. And the same thing with the tea. So we're now seeing that hotels are beginning to say, well, look, if they have a really wonderful tea experience within the spa or within the room, and it's a sleep ritual, for example, we'd love for people to have that brand experience at home. So I won't kind of mention the brand name, but that brand at home, so people can have the same sleep tea ritual that they experienced in the hotel, which gave them an amazing night's sleep, and they can
Yeah.
recreate that in their home through the tea and the ritualization of it. So we're having a lot of conversations, not just hotels and spas, but brands as well, who are saying, look, we really want to, use tea as a vehicle to create that kind of that brand linked lifestyle experience when people go home. And also the final thing I guess I'd say is, when you go to a spa and you're spending, 40, 50, 60, 70 pounds and above on a nice spa product, from a commercial point of view, if you want to buy a bespoke tea, the price point in that typically is anywhere between 10 to 20 pounds. So the price point is way lower. And it just becomes an easier decision-making process for the customer to buy a little bit of their experience and take it home with them. Um, so there's some of the things that we're seeing at the moment, which is great.
Actually, a really good point. I think that often you're right. There are people who want to take a piece of spa home. Some of the spa products can be quite expensive. And if it's if you've an aspirational purchase to come to that spa, actually, if you can take a piece of the spa home for, £20 in the tea, that's actually a really nice take home. You can then enjoy that and reflect and remember that visit that you had to that spa. And I guess you touched on it, but that's how a signature tea can support guest loyalty and that brand differentiation rather than just being another retail item. It's actually very brand orientated,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. Um,
I mean, are there any, on the note of the sort of the making of the teas, are there any operational considerations that Spa needs to think about? How do they, is there guidance on how to make the teas so they can be in a relaxation room, those sort of elements?
yeah, I mean, I mean, the first thing to say about that is that we are super passionate about tea, and Lubna, being a trained homeopath and herbalist, we take, for example, the first step for us is tea training. So we really, really enjoy training our therapists about tea. It's not just about the tea tastes like this, but actually really trying to educate the therapist about, what does each individual herb do to the body? Are there any contraindications? How does that interact with the other herbs? So that when people go into the spa, clients go in, the therapist can sound educated, informed, and make good recommendations if there's a range of teas to choose from. Um, and you know, if a tea's been designed to give you certain health benefits, sometimes the therapist, depending on the philosophy of the spa, sometimes the therapist like to sit and talk to the customer and just say, hey, I'm trying to get a sense of their well-being, and then maybe recommend a tea based on their client's particular health needs or wellness journeys that they're on. So we help spas train around that, and we kind of educate them how to do that. But then obviously teas are food and drink products, so you need care about how to kind of store it, how to prepare it, and how people drink it. And so we give training around that. But typically, I mean, tea is just tea, and it's not rocket science to prepare it. So it's you just really, I mean, ultimately, you just need a source of hot water, and you need some teapots or some mugs if you're using tea bags. And it's not that deep in terms of how to make a cup of tea, but it's where the kind of the bells and whistles come is how you present that tea, and how you showcase it, and how the benefits of that tea can be passed on to the client. But generally speaking, it is just really easy to prepare. Quite often spas, because spas tend to be quite warm environments. So some spas say, look, we love the idea of having cold beverages, and every tea can be turned into a really gorgeous iced tea of some sort. It can be a cold brew where you just put some tea and some water, put it in the fridge overnight, and in the morning you've got a perfectly brewed cold brew, which has all of, I mean, cold brew basically means you have all of the beautiful flavor profiles of the tea, but you don't have any of the tannins. So for example, if you have like like an overbrewed English breakfast, you get that kind of bitterness vibe in the flavor. But if you cold brew it, you get the flavor profiles, but not those kind of bitter tannins. So that's kind of a nice, yeah. It's so that's why cold brew is so popular now, and um, and it's quite a nice thing from an operational point of view because if before you close the spa for the evening, you just stick a bit of tea and a jar of water, and you're kind of done for the next day. You just need to strain the tea leaves. So cold brews work really well, and then you can just decant them over ice. You can give a client a bit of honey, or you can give them a garnish of some mint or something else just to kind of jazz it up a little bit. Um, and if you want to do hot teas, they're also really easy. It's just like making any regular cup of tea. Just need to be aware of brewing instructions and the water temperature. Um, and as I was saying earlier, a lot of spas use the tea in relaxation areas, and quite often it can be a self-serve option. So you can provide people with the tea either in tea bags or loose tea format, give them some hot water and cups and saucers, and it can be really, really simple. People just help themselves if you have a very busy operational spa environment. So there's no kind of perfect answer, but there's just so many ways. Tea's very flexible, and whoever we work with, we look at their operations and create a tailored kind of spa protocol around how to make your tea, basically. Um,
You touched on the cold blend there because a cold brew, I think, I guess there are trends that do happen in the tea and the wellness food and drink industry. What are you seeing on the sort of trend side of the industry?
yeah, this is a good question. I mean, I think, Lima, feel free to chip in. You're the expert on this, but Um, in terms of wellness teas, it's there's a lot of buzzwords around adaptogenic, food and drink products, or coffees, whatever, and also functional benefits, and that's really where the trend is. People are just so more educated now. So particularly since COVID, everything just really accelerated in terms of
Yeah.
people's understanding of how to manage their health outside of a doctor's kind of practice.
I think
And
people have a lot more self-awareness, don't they, now? And like Ajit said, it's all about the buzzword longevity. People are a lot more aware about their hormonal health. They're, looking at their gut and what they're eating. They're exercising so much more, and they're just getting really, a lot more clued up about how to look after yourself. And it's all over social media as well, right? And like Ajit mentioned, I think, that's one good thing that COVID did bring us. It's, this self-awareness. And, but also, I think people are looking for an easy solution as opposed to a complicated one. And they want it to fit into their daily life, whatever they choosing to do. It's got to be simple, it's got to be enjoyable. And actually tea kind of fits quite nicely into this, what I would call it a new wellness movement.
can I
So
just add to that as well? Like, like a really good example of what Luna's just been saying is like, there's the rise and rise and rise of matcha. It's all over TikTok, it's all over social media about and all the cool kids are drinking matcha now. And matcha's been around for thousands of years. So it's always this, it's but I think there was one video on TikTok and it went viral, and suddenly after thousands of years of people like enjoying matcha, you just can't buy it. We struggle to buy matcha now. So it's and it's on trend. And so Lubna and I have been working more. Lubna just creating these amazing, wonderful matcha blends with like a billion different ingredients, like ashwagandha, tulsi, and all sorts of things. Because we're getting customers who will say, "Hey, listen, we really want to have a pre-workout tea." Like a pre-gym workout tea because we've heard matcha is really good for energy and it's just this wonder thing. But we also want to use matcha as a post-workout tea to help us recover from our exercise. So we've been working with brands about how do we create a matcha that really helps the body exercise, gives it nutrition, but also gives it kind of all of the things that it needs to have a really intense workout. And then, what are those things that helps your body recover from an intense workout? So we've been looking at not just matcha tea blends, but how to make that operationally viable. So matcha not made in a nice bowl with a whisk and a hot water, and you drink it like this, but actually having it in, like a shaker, a smoothie shaker, putting in some matcha with some ice cubes, putting in water and giving it a shake, and kind of trying to embrace the trends a little bit. And actually, matcha works really, really well. And, I'm sure the Japanese would hate me saying this, but I think having it in with some cold water and ice, giving it a really good shake and downing it is just as nice sometimes as doing the traditional style. So there's a lot of changes happening, innovation happening.
Trend, right? So that's the new trend.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so
So
this,
the
yeah, so
new,
that's kind of, yeah, I
the
know.
old trend.
Yeah.
Old school is always the best school, in my opinion, ultimately. But it's like,
Now we
you
sound
know,
like our parents.
yeah. And we're even seeing, actually, that reminds me of, in our tea shops, we also have, matcha as a coffee shop now, because that's kind of cool. You put matcha powder into the thing that I forget the name that goes into the coffee machine,
Oh yeah,
and instead of putting coffee, you put matcha in, and you hit the water button, and you get a really quick infusion of matcha. So people are beginning to, ask kind of weird, what are you doing with that? But actually, when you're on the go and you're coming in for your coffee shop because you just want, need a caffeine hit before you hit the desk, people are now beginning to choose matcha because actually it's more potent than coffee in terms of an instant energy boost. It's really potent stuff if you do it in a concentrated way, and it's just so much more healthy than coffee because you're ingesting the full plant. You're not just it's not an infusion. It's actually you're absorbing some really, really healthy kind of vegetable kind of material, and it's full of polyphenols and things which are just really good for your body. So yeah, all of those trends are leading that way. People are just more educated and they understand these things and are making considered choices now, which is great.
And just to clarify, because I know what they are, but aptogenics, what are they? You mentioned those at the beginning of talking about trends.
Yeah, well, I guess the simplest way to kind of describe them, they're just herbs that help you adapt to daily life. That's that's basically what it means. So rather than
Yeah.
reaching out for maybe a sleeping pill, you would maybe look at ashwagandha that may help support, sleep or stress. So it's functional. It's a natural substance that really helps you adapt to any stressors in daily life. That's the
And
simplest way.
mushrooms are on the massive increase, aren't they? You mentioned ashwagandha there and lion's mane, and they're again a trend that you're seeing incorporated into tea as well, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. I do not start the day without lion's mane. Even my child has it. It's great for focus. It's just got so many health benefits, cognitive health benefits. I agree with you. And, it's great that all these ingredients have been looked into now and, are being used. And I think actually, unfortunately, the UK's got a little way to go because it's still, mushrooms are I guess it's not not
Novel food.
used,
Yeah.
yeah, because there are so many restrictions around it. But hopefully over time that's going to be lifted and we can kind of have access to it more
Yeah,
easily.
mushrooms are a bit like CBD actually. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, a few years ago, there was CBD on the shelves everywhere, and it was completely unregulated. And now it's hard to buy. Well, it's not hard to buy, but there's much less of them, and that's because a lot of
Mm.
CBD, the Novel Foods Act and safety around food and drink, and it's a little bit the same with kind of mushrooms. I was speaking to someone yesterday about trying to make tea bags using mushrooms and some of the ingredients that Libra's got. So that we can't touch it because it's considered a novel food and it's not approved by the Food Standards Agency. So
It hasn't been
yeah,
updated. That's why.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
So for
interesting.
my so for my final question before we go, If a spa manager is thinking, I love this idea, but where do I start? What would be the first steps that they should take?
Well, I would say if you're starting from scratch, the most important thing is think about, like what we mentioned earlier, is the intention. What is the intention of the tea? What is its purpose? And once you have that, you're pretty much there. I would say the second thing will be where will this tea sit in your client's journey? So you've got to kind of map it out. Where is it going to be in the spa, in the journey? Where is the client going to drink this tea? And the third thing is, especially, I mean, it can be overwhelming, right? So maybe start small. A lot of spas want like a range of bespoke teas that sit in different areas of the spa or treatments. And if you're new to this, you can start small. You can create one beautiful bespoke tea, and then you can eventually build up as and when you need it. Yeah,
Mm,
and those are the three simple things. And also, we do actually support our spas, and we have created, starter packs, so which easily slot in into the whole, spa environment. So that's kind of created as well. So it's not really much to think about.
And I was just going to say, just to add to what Lubna's been saying, is we haven't talked much about them, but we do have like if you like, a bog standard. I mean, I hate to use that word because it really underplays what they are, but kind of a bog standard set of teas. So we have kind of, as we call them, a set of functional teas, which each of the teas across the range of four or five, they kind of tick every box a spa needs in terms of if they're looking for, better digestion, more energy, detoxification, relaxation, and they kind of tick all of those boxes. And so, as Lena mentioned, we have the spa starter pack. You get each one of those teas, you get a range, you get display items, you get point of sale material. And it's just a really, really easy way just to start your journey with the tea. And then once you feel more confident, you can then maybe move into bespokes and get more funky with your tea and get a bit more considered. But yeah, the spa starter pack, I think, is probably the best way for people to get going.
I'm sorry to interject there, but
Yeah.
I think they also come with 5 minute meditation as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, they do. So we've actually Mark Smith from European Spa Magazine has created a wonderful meditation for us to for our teas. So yeah, you get access to that as well. And yeah, we just both Luna and I meditate. We're practitioners, and you know we just think mindfulness is so important generally, but also when you're drinking tea. If you've had a beautiful treatment, at the end of the journey, people, instead of just throwing your clothes on and running out of the door to go to your next appointment, if you can build 5 minutes to the end of the treatment, just sit, relax, drink your tea, and just be mindful of what's happened to your body. Really feel the hands on your body, whatever the treatment was, and just absorb it, because then I just think you get so much more of a health benefit and kind of sensory and all of the things above, get so much more out of just sitting down 5 minutes reflecting before you start the rest of your day. And yeah, we just want people when they drink tea to try and do that more because we just think it's a beautiful thing to do. Um,
enjoy the tea and then and have that moment of reflection is so important
yeah,
rather than having a treatment and experience and then just moving on. Actually being able to go,
Yeah.
well,
exactly,
I've just really enjoyed that and how's that made me feel is so important.
exactly. So important. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, and I've really learned so much myself. I
Thank
think,
you.
like I said, at the Spa at South Lodge, we did have a bespoke tea, and it had that very much integral to our brand and our journey and our experience. And I think it's definitely a huge benefit for a spa to consider tea, like you say, as more than just a cup of tea, as part of
Yeah.
your brand concepts and your pillars of well-being. So thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me today.
No,
Thank you for
Sarah,
having us.
thank you so much for having us and being so energetic and enthused by it. And yeah, we're very grateful. So thank you. It's been a pleasure for me.
Thank you.
Well, sure.